is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of DeFi Decoded. I'm Alex Tapscott, here with Andrew Young. We've done a lot of talking over the past year and a half about all the ways in which Web3 is changing various industries. This started off as a podcast about decentralized finance, but pretty quickly we realized that it wasn't just one industry that was being transformed by this technology. Everything from entertainment to supply chains to other elements of the technology industry were being reimagined with Web3 tools. One of those areas is gaming. And Andrew and I have talked a lot about how we see gaming as a sort of a key vector of growth for Web3 that, to engage mainstream users in this tool set, that having fun ways of doing so through games is a really kind of creative and viral way to do that. And one of the sort of interesting businesses that has emerged around the Web3 gaming space are these so-called gaming guilds, which basically create ways for users to engage with Web3 games in a whole variety of ways. And we'll get into what that means exactly shortly with our very special guest on the show. But another thing that gaming has revealed, I think, is that Web3 is truly a global phenomenon. I think we mentioned on a recent episode how Web3 innovation is kind of happening to everything, everywhere, all at once, all around the world. And if anything, there's more adoption and more experimentation happening in what's called the global south, in areas where you've got a young, digitally native, connected population that is using these tools in sort of new and unexpected ways. And that also intersects really interestingly with the gaming story as well. So to make sense of all of this, the rise of Web3 in the global south, gaming as a vertical for growth, and everything in between, I'm delighted to introduce our special guest, Beryl Li, who's the co-founder of the decentralized play-to-earn gaming guild, Yield Guild Games. As a fintech entrepreneur, she co-founded CapChainX, an asset tokenization platform that was acquired by SMKG in 2019, and was on the founding team at Coins.ph, a leading crypto exchange in the Philippines that was acquired by Gojek in 2019. Beryl holds a Master of Finance from Cambridge University, where she sat as president of the Cambridge University Cryptocurrency Society in her final year of study. She's passionate about financial empowerment, especially in emerging economies. Beryl has unique insights into Web3 adoption globally, but particularly in these areas that we're so fascinated by. And what Yield Guild Games just yesterday or a day before that announced a big rebrand for the organization, which really leads into some of these big themes, which we're going to dive into in just a sec. So before we do so, Beryl, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Alex. Hi, and great to be here.
Yeah. So in the introduction for you, we talked a little bit about your journey, how, in university, you were involved with the Cryptocurrency Society. You've been involved in a couple of exits in the crypto space. So this is not a new thing for you. You've been at it for a while. So tell us a little bit about your journey into the space.
Oh, wow. So I've been in, so I started with Bitcoin in 2013. And I joined cryptocurrency startup called Coins.ph. It was the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the Philippines and wallet provider. Was looking into Bitcoin as an infrastructure to move funds very much because 10% of the Philippine population was actually abroad, like remitting funds to the Philippines. So that really captured my interest. And then later on, I figured that Bitcoin became really interesting because the infrastructure is actually the blockchain technology itself, where you could actually put assets, these various assets on the blockchain. And with the rise of, like Ethereum, smart contracts, and all these other chains, it became very interesting to actually see this myriad of assets, right, on the blockchain itself. So that's when I started CapChain. And then, after I started consulting for Union Bank of the Philippines, on their blockchain arm, I came across with my co-founder, Gabby. We were using all these DeFi platforms, this like August of 2020, and this is when we actually decided how does yield look like in gaming, right? How do we actually empower a lot of people who are not sharks, who do not have the capital of wealth to actually be in crypto? And that is when we actually started this gaming phenomenon through Yield Guild Games as a gaming guild.
Fascinating. Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about around DeFi is that as innovative as it is, and there are protocols in DeFi that are trying to disrupt every element of what the industry does, from lending to trading to risk management and so forth. In order to be in DeFi, you sort of have to start with crypto, right? You've got to be kind of crypto native, and that's going to change over time. But it's been one of the things I think that's limited its growth somewhat. I think of DeFi as almost like playing poker online. It's quite intimidating when you realize that you're going to be sitting at the table with people who spending all day using these kinds of tools, right, and using these kinds of platforms. And gaming is such a fascinating thing, because there are people who love gaming, and there are people who love to own assets and to make money. And so finding interesting, well, I think everybody does, finding interesting ways to combine these things seems like a really powerful or potent recipe to drive adoption. So tell us about that journey, like starting in 2020 with this idea of yield for non-crypto people. What did it look like in the early days?
Yeah, so maybe I could give you an example of the first game that really flourished from Southeast Asia, particularly in the Philippines, called Axie Infinity. So within this game, you actually need to battle with three game-like creatures, which we call like Axies. These are actually non-fungible tokens or assets on the blockchain. And people actually had to play with them to battle to be able to actually earn in-game rewards, right? And these in-game rewards are also in the form of cryptocurrency. Without them realizing that these assets are actually blockchain-based assets, they're able to actually retrieve them, purchase them, battle with them. And in exchange, they're able to actually earn these rewards and figure out a way how to convert them into real fiat currency. And because of that, they're more incentivized to convert them, to learn about how to actually move these rewards into ETH or ETH into these centralized exchanges to be able to convert them into Philippine pesos. And in an instance, they're able to convert them and hold real cash. They're able to really buy staples, for example. They're able to pay out their debt. And then after a while, when they actually start earning more than their minimum wage, now they're able to actually experiment with all these other platforms over the internet, like decentralized finance. They're actually the first ones that actually end up learning how to use Uniswap or SushiSwap, all these complicated DeFi platforms. But because they're able to experiment with through gaming without them realizing that it's actually on the blockchain, they're able to really learn it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I want to get back to the Axie story in a bit, because Axie is one of those interesting stories where, that model was incredibly powerful, driving tons of users, but the tokenomic model was not sustainable, right? In a way that allowed, the final people that sort of got into it to actually earn the kinds of rewards that I think they come to expect, right? And I think that developing token reward systems in games is one of these new fields where people are still trying to figure out what the right mix is. I've heard a lot of people talk about play to earn as being a bit of a misnomer, because the purpose of play is not just to earn. And if anything, if you think you can just play games in order to earn a living, then you're probably going to be disappointed. But there's this element of play and earn, where owning assets, earning income for creating value inside of a game, or for participating in that game's economy, is something that should earn you something. Whether or not it's enough to live on is a different matter. But the idea of, this is earn as a component of gameplay, right? Play and earn being sort of the key thing here. So I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts on that, especially as you think about that in the context of your rebrand?
Oh yes, of course. I believe that these genres, right? Whether we call it play to earn, play and earn, free to play, right? They're forever evolving, and they will evolve, right? eventually, as we kind of like mature in in games on the blockchain, or what we call GameFi in the space. I'll go back to our rebrand. So YGG actually rebranded into a ruin system as a foundation. That is because it's more of a representation of our values and our culture of putting our community first, right? We believe that the community, that plays together really stays together, and they together they can actually unlock a lot of like successes, and gaming as a community becomes much more what they call fun, right? The earning component, if you take away the earning component, I guess like it's very much like human nature that you actually want like rewards at the end, and taking it out would actually pretty much like this incentivize a number of like people playing as well. But if you actually have community, you actually have an earning component, and you actually have gameplay that really like excites you. I guess like those are the three really important like components of gaming.
Yeah, interesting. Andrew, do you want to hop in?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious because like what are the games that are particularly exciting right now? I mean, when me and Alex sort of explored the guild universe last year, we were sort of coming off the bust of Axie Infinity, and there's a couple of new games emerging. But I'm just kind of curious, where are the big opportunities right now in the play to earn space?
Yeah. So because of the bear market, a lot of the games that were supposed to launch during the first quarter kind of like delayed their launch until probably when the market kind of recovers a little bit towards like the end of 2023. But then we're live with a few games at YGG. So for example, we have like Fancy Birds that people are actually playing with. There are a number. So we've diversified our games to like 50 game titles. We have, like Crypto Unicorns or Genopets, for example. Genopets is what we call X to earn. It's a move to earn kind of phenomenon, right? Kind of like like your digital pets, and then they kind of like change when you complete certain amount of steps, for example. Also, that's Genopets. I am particularly excited with My Pet Hooligans, just because they have like a really great team. For example, they're like ex-Disney, ex-Pixar folks that used to like they used to work on Toy Story, for example, in the past. So they're bringing in a different kind of like gameplay in their games with something really exciting. And if you actually look at the pets, for example, on My Pet Hooligans, the actual avatars, they're really adorable, right? So that is actually one game to kind of look out for, and many more towards the end of the year that I'm excited about.
Yeah, do you think you mentioned that some of these things maybe got pushed back, but one of the big themes that people have talked about for the past year is that a lot of traditional gaming studios or like big time developers, or people who've got experience with big IP like those Pixar folks have been working at this for a while. And actually, if you think about like the life cycle of developing the game, it sometimes takes a year or two. And so if anything, it's not that like there's a backlog of content and titles that's coming out that's really going to help to bridge this gap of kind of obfuscating the Web3 component in a way where you're interacting with the game, you're playing it because you love it, you're earning rewards, you're buying and selling assets, you're owning things in a real sense of the word, but you're not really feeling like you're part of you're not feeling like you're directly exposed to the underlying technology. Do you think that's something that you're basically saying is coming forward in the next little while, right?
Yeah, and it requires talent, right, to be able to really build high definition games with various genres that could actually meet the demands of like different interest groups. So I think what's important within Web3 gaming is we're seeing a lot of folks from AAA studios coming into the space, developing these Web3 games, as well as coming from the likes of Disney and Pixar, which makes it exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one other thing there's lots I want to talk about, but at the last time we spoke, you told me how you were looking at Yield Guild YGG as sort of like Fiverr for the metaverse. That was the expression you used. I don't know if you still stand by this this term,
Absolutely.
but basically that, like in the same way that you might use Fiverr TaskRabbit to get people to do tasks like IRL, like in the real world. In the metaverse, you need ways to sort of help connect people with opportunities to earn, and it could be just like playing games, or it could be all these other X to earn things that you're talking about. So before we get into that, this topic of the metaverse is something that we always find helpful when people define, because every definition is a little bit different. But I noticed how in the materials and then in our previous conversation, you talked about an open metaverse. So like, what does that mean to you, an open metaverse versus a closed metaverse or a metaverse? Like, what's the difference?
A concept of metaverses existing in this megaverse, right? So you have multiple economies that like interact with each other, and then there's a proliferation of various roles within each of these economies, allowing a lot of people from Web 2 moving to Web 3 to kind of like succeed, right? And it is also connected to the future of work, where if I look into the statistics today, right, there's actually more of the Gen Z and the millennials who are spending more time digitally, right? They're probably spending around like 40% of their waking hours online. There are 2 billion gamers, 3 billion gamers out there. And the typical gamer would actually spend 14% of their waking hours playing games, right? So there is actually a massive number of people spending their time online, right? And everything will just get digitalized. And if they're actually spending a lot of their time online, shouldn't they actually be participating in online economies where they can actually earn their assets, for example, in the metaverse, where they can use their assets, for instance, to take out a loan, for example, or have these applications on top of the metaverse, knowing, for example, how many hours they spend, for example, in a particular game, how much rewards do they actually earn, what wallets do they interact with, what are they interested in, and based on that, they're able to actually access financial services.
Yeah.
And one thing that's really interesting that we've seen is actually a bit of a melding of metaverse and DeFi games into each other. So, for example, DeFi Kingdoms was a huge success, and it essentially gamified like a DeFi app and made it into almost like a metaverse style game. Is that something that you see happening a lot more? Like, I mean, the original pioneer of this was Decentraland, where you could get mortgages on sort of the plots of land in Decentraland, which was pretty cool. And we've talked a little bit about that. We got a sort of a 2048 subprime crisis for Decentraland mortgages coming, I'm sure. But I'm just kind of curious, like, what's your take on like the actual sort of gamification and metaverse versions of DeFi apps themselves? Is that something that you've sort of been playing with? And is that something you're sort of excited about, or I'm just kind of curious?
So DeFi applications right now, there's still a lot of like development that's needed for their user experience, right? And gaming and finance together as GameFi should be very seamless. So when I actually move my assets from me as my avatar playing, and I have my own like assets, for example, swords and shields, and I want to actually transfer it to an avatar that I actually just see in the metaverse, I should seamlessly be able to actually transfer that. I should not be able to log onto a marketplace and then manually look for like prices and then match it with a buyer, right? Like the experience should actually be very seamless, meeting an avatar online and then just transferring assets in the metaverse. So I believe that in the future, there's really going to be a more, I'd say, like a seamless kind of experience where gaming and finance are just like together, that you wouldn't even think that, oh, I'm in the financial platform or I'm actually in the marketplace, but you're actually just playing and just focusing on the actual, the actual activity.
You mentioned something there about avatars, and that's another theme that I'm really interested in, which is this identity and reputation, or proof of humanness, as I've heard you say before in the past. This if YGG is how someone builds an identity in the open metaverse that gives them ways to earn money or access financial services, then in a way you've kind of helped them to bootstrap a reputation for Web3, right? And you become like the platform or the way in which that has happened. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because identity seems like this incredible opportunity for reimagining or reinvention.
Identity is a very important component if you want more individuals to kind of like be protected, for example, in the metaverse, or to actually access other opportunities in the metaverse, right? So within YGG, we're building a reputation system based out of soulbound tokens as the first layer. It is very much based on achievements. So for example, if an individual is able to kind of pass certain quests, is able to achieve something, and it can be proven on-chain, we're able to provide them a non-transferable token, which we call like a pass or an NFT. And it actually stays in that user's account and wallet. And a combination of all of these soulbound tokens tell a story about the individual. And based on that, you're able to actually access, for example, other games that want to push, for example, fashion games, right? If I'm actually pushing my new fashion game, I'd like to know who are the potential players of my game who are incredibly interested in fashion. And if somebody actually holds a World of Women NFT or has actually played similar fashion games in the past, they're able to actually airdrop an NFT on this fashion game as a way to kind of as a marketing campaign. So there's a lot of activities that can actually be built on top of reputation, as well as unlocking opportunities such as other forms of uncollateralized loans, like what I mentioned earlier, that based out of my interests or how much I'm actually earning in the games online, my skill, how many hours I spend, I'm able to actually take out a mortgage or a loan.
Yeah. I find that to be a real inversion of the Web 2 model, where in the Web 2 model, the data is the moat, right? The fact that you have all this information about customers allows you to continue to sell them things, and the absence of that information is what keeps your competitors out, right? And so that means that this data pool is like the most important thing. But in a world where all of that information is contained in a soul-bound token, which is to say, a digital good that's like tied to an individual, then the individual is like taking all that information with them everywhere they go, right? Or that information is open to the public. And so it really eliminates that moat in a way, and reduces the importance of data as like as an asset class for an organization, but almost enhances it in other ways. I don't know if you have any opinion on that. I'm trying to tease out just what the significance of that is. It seems meaningful.
Definitely on-chain data is something that's verifiable. So that's pretty, I'd say, unique in the Web3 space. And also, one more thing is it's more inclusive because there are certain activities that don't require, for example, other third parties to know whether you're male or female, or whether you're actually living in South America or the Philippines, right? And it offers you the same opportunities based on your on-chain activities or your achievements, without revealing your gender or location.
Yeah. So where would you say the most adoption is happening today with YGG? like, and maybe just tell us a little bit about like the organizational structure, because it's a decentralized thing, but you're a co-founder, and I know that there's sort of local leadership, and so to speak. And I'm just wondering, like, where is this adoption taking place?
So we started in the Philippines. And quite interestingly, we also started during the pandemic. We saw an opportunity in the Philippines during the lockdowns when people had no jobs, but with an internet connectivity and a smartphone, they're able to take part in Web3, in gaming, in DeFi and GameFi. They're able to download games and participate. And this actually spread so quickly because all our activities happen in our Discord channel. The next thing we know, we have Latin American speakers or people from India who are part of a group of Indian players. So it spread really quickly that YGG was able to really build its MOAT location and regional wise. So we even have YGG in Korea, in Japan, Turkey. We have North America right now, but mostly emerging markets. We started in emerging markets. Southeast Asia, Latin America, and India were our first three markets we launched. And it's growing quite fast regionally. We're all remote. We don't have an office. We all work on our Discord. As long as we're on Discord or Slack, that's how we actually end up working. A lot of people actually ask, "Oh, so you don't have an office? Isn't that aren't you actually thinking about resuming an office?" Oh, we started during the pandemic, and we started remote, and it actually works for us. And so we do not have plans having any physical offices.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see just how much sort of Yield Guild Games has grown over the last couple of years. I'm kind of curious, what do you see the next sort of 5-10 years look like? Like what does Yield Guild Games look like 10 years from now?
Tough
So
question.
that's a very good question, right? But I think one thing will remain: we're going to be upskilling a lot of we're going to be upskilling gamers or people in Web2 to be able to be ready for all these Web3 applications in the future. Again, you said, Alex, a Fiverr for the Metaverse.
Yeah.
So if anybody actually wants to seek opportunities in the Metaverse, whether in the form of earning potential or to be actually part of a community that resonates to them, they're able to actually go to YGG, find their community, and then together within their community or sub-community, they're able to engage in an activity that makes them happy, right? It's either they're there to find a job or work, right? In the form of maybe selling Metaverse land, being a broker in the Metaverse, or being a new kind of influencer in the Metaverse, or engaging in competitive play like esports, right? And I believe in the future, 5-10 years, there's going to be so apart from a proliferation of roles in the Metaverse, a lot of our day-to-day activities would also be in the Metaverse. So the way that we work out, for example, will be in the Metaverse. Learning, for example, will also be in the Metaverse. And so there's going to be gamified applications, if you call them, right? So it's still activity in the real world, but then they're highly gamified, right? So how would the classroom look like in the Metaverse, right? It's going to be very much interactive. Maybe students would actually have their avatars interacting with other avatars, right? So there's going to be a movement in socials, for example, in the Metaverse. So I see that there's going to be more activities, definitely in the Metaverse, and we at YGG want to be able to cater a massive platform for anybody to actually find to find their community and take part in any activity within the Metaverse.
I love the X to earn theme because there's so many different areas where having simple reward mechanism would solve a lot of problems, like the learn to earn side, which you've alluded to, there's this demand for, people who have the ability to like code in Solidity, for example. And so there's a project, I'm trying to remember what its name is, but
Metacrafters.
That's right, Metacrafters. Yeah, where it's like, okay, there's a demand for this thing. If we can get people to prove that they can do this, then they should be able to earn a reward as a result. And they're also going to get a certificate that's like on chain, so everyone knows that for a fact that they have those kinds of skills, or they have that accreditation. The move to earn stuff I think is really fascinating. I think it's the first iterations are a little early. Step in and Sweatcoin. Like it's obvious, like, yeah, if people get out and move around more, then it's going to reduce the burden on the healthcare system. And people are going to live longer, and all these other sort of positive externalities, or there are going to be fewer car accidents or less drunk driving because people are walking, like all these things. It's like obviously good things that can come about it. So why not create an incentive for them to participate in that? But so far, it seems like the token models are either like in Stepan's case, it was good at the start, but eventually petered out. Or in Sweatcoin, it's not really enough to really genuinely motivate someone. It's like, oh, I can earn like an extra $20 a year doing this. Well, okay, when you factor that, into the rest of my life, that's not really that meaningful. But I still think there's a really interesting opportunity there. And like the idea that, if there was a one-stop shop for me to access ways to earn money, by engaging in these kinds of things, then that's something that seems like incredibly useful. So I think you guys are really in the perfect spot of the market. It's also one of those things too, where in YGG's case, it may be that video games are the first area where this had success, right? Maybe that's almost like a skeuomorphic design choice, because there's lots of other games where, you buy and sell assets, where you earn assets, and where you spend money on things. But the only difference is that in like a pre-blockchain world, you buy the assets, but you don't actually get to own the assets, and you have no property rights over the assets. But it's an easy sort of leap to make to like a Web3 world. But that eventually, actually, this idea of X to earn will be one of the ways in which people just work or earn or learn or do any of these other things. So I find that just to be so fascinating. Yeah, Andrew. So do you have any other questions?
No, I think I guess my question I always ask is just because we're so focused on it, is myself and Alex sort of talk constantly about the multi-chain world that we're heading into. Obviously, a lot of the play-to-earn games initially were built on Ethereum. We're now starting to see some app chains get created. The obvious example being something like Ronin and Axie Infinity, and Immutable just announced they were building a Polygon ZK EVM chain as well yesterday, which was sort of the big news of the big early news of the week. I'm just kind of curious, what's your take as sort of the founder of a guild? Which chains do you think are going to come out ahead within the sort of gaming niche? Is there anything that you're seeing that like any chains that look specifically exciting, and whether it's going to be Ethereum long term, or do you think it'll increasingly be more application chains like Ronin?
This is a very technical question. But it's a very technical question. I'm not so sure, but I could see is there are popular chains where games are actually building. So, for example, there were a number of like games building on Solana, right? And then a lot of games are actually on Polygon. At one point, they told me they have like over 1,000 games building on Polygon right now. Some of our portfolio companies, right, or the assets that we purchase, are actually on Immutable as well, and then Ronin have games as well building on it these days, and I think they'll probably make an announcement sometime soon on what those games would look like. I think at the end of the day, because it's still very new in gaming on the blockchain, we should be able to really see which of these games are doing really well on the chain, right? They need to launch first and have like a massive community playing on the game to actually know whether the game actually works really well on that chain, or or whether they're token economics in practice. So in theory looks different from like practice, right? In practice, you actually see like the pain points, for example, or the weaknesses of a certain economic model. So when they actually launch, probably most likely end of the year, we'll actually be seeing most of them. We also have Oasis as well. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like in an open metaverse.
Metaverse.
Sorry, I just watched the Oscars and everything everywhere all at once. In an open metaverse, and if everyone's just building in a completely uncoordinated way, then what's going to happen is there's going to be things on different blockchains. Like, that's how it'll evolve. And so how they all interact and intersect with each other will be one of the central like design and technical challenges of how to actually knit this world together. I'm way beyond, but it's certainly an interesting challenge that I think will need to be solved in order to fulfill the vision that you're describing ultimately, right?
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really interesting too is if we do get a lot of fragmentation across chains, then projects like Yield Games become even more important because they become almost like the aggregator for people to sort of play these different games. So it's almost like if you see a lot of fragmentation in terms of chains and different games, then I at least sort of I'm not an expert on blockchain gaming, but it seems like that actually will benefit Yield Games quite a bit because it almost becomes like the entry point for a lot of people into this huge universe.
Yeah, so I see a number of like new protocols emerging, really solving the problem of interoperability, right, among all these chains. So, for example, Succint, they're based out of the Bay Area, using like ZK, zero knowledge kind of like technology, as well. So, I guess in like 5 years' time, when you're building something, hopefully you wouldn't even think about what chain to actually like build on. There's probably just one build, and then at the back of it, there's going to be different functionalities, right? And each of these chains will actually specialize on that particular areas. For example, if it's finance related, this chain. If it's actually assets related, it's this chain. And then there has been conversations if a game itself will actually be on chain, right? Like right now, I'd say it's very much like 2.5, right? They call it 2.5, where it's actually mostly the assets that are on chain, but the game is still, a desk, like an app, right?
Right.
So it'll be very interesting which chain as well would be used to build the game on top, right? And then in the future, this should not matter. Everything should actually be seamless.
Yeah, well, that's the vision where the open metaverse is being rendered using the render network, and the data that's being stored long term is held in the IPFS, and we're all using Filecoin. Like this idea that the solution to the challenges of the metaverse, which is how do you actually create an open, persistent, virtual world where everyone can freely interact using the technology tools that we have today, is like the central challenge. And that's one of the criticisms of like the Web3 metaverse concept, is that this is impossible with server farms and centralized clouds. So what makes you think it's going to work with decentralized tools? And maybe there's a point there, but my view is that with all these kinds of technology innovations, you have to ask yourself, like, is it a reason that it's not going to succeed, or it's a bad idea, or is it an implementation challenge to be overcome? And I think, if anything, it's the latter. And if you actually look at the success of some of these decentralized infrastructure opportunity, like plays, like whether it's Render, Filecoin, or whatever, if anything, they are the tickets to, or the solution to this, because they can harness the collective computing power, rendering power, storage, and so forth of of every latent device in the world. And that's the only way you're going to make this work anyway. So anyway, these are all, maybe we should have a follow-on episode to discuss.
This is interesting.
In more detail. Yeah, no, it's a topic that, it's a challenging one to tease out. I think that we're still a really long way away from having an interoperable open metaverse where, that fulfills like the Ready Player One vision or whatever, people anchored themselves to in the world of fiction, the various sort of ideas, whether it's neuromancer or snow crash or whatever, but like all of these different visions of what it could look like, whatever we're at today, we're a ways away from that end state. But I think like YGG and organizations like it are critical sort of infrastructure that's being put in place to make it easier, right? So it's just very exciting what you're doing. And
thank you.
And we wish you all the best. And we just want to say thank you again for being so generous with your time and your insights. This has been a really awesome discussion. As always, I've learned a lot, and it just makes me want to dive deeper into what you're doing, and also to maybe have you back on. So before we split, where can people find out more information about Yield Guild Games, everything you're doing?
Yeah, so of course we've rebranded. We have a new website. It's yieldguild.io. We're very much online as well. You can see us on Twitter at Yield Guild Games, as well as on Discord. So if you'd like to actually check out the games that we actually support, or join any community, feel free to actually go on Discord and look for us, Yield Guild.
Awesome. Beryl, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. That's it for this week's episode of DeFi Decoded. Stay tuned. There's going to be tons more awesome guests along the same lines of what we've had. And I think today's episode is just a prime example of the awesome conversations that we've been having recently. Bear markets are where a lot of the builders are really making big leaps and doing some really interesting stuff. So just so inspiring, and to see what you're up to, Beryl, and wish you all the best. Hope to speak soon. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, everyone, we'll see you next week. That's it for this week's DeFi Decoded. Take care.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.